All right, this is Councilman Victor Jones, the chairman of the City of High Point's Public Safety Committee. Today is Wednesday, March 23rd. Our first item on the agenda is item 2022-147, the discussion of tractor trailer parking in neighborhoods.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, just so you know, we have a couple different staff members who are going to talk about this. It does involve the code enforcement area, the police department, and the transportation department. So first up, we're going to have Lori Loosemore do her part on the code enforcement part of it.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I was going to say Mayor, City Council. We're not there yet. Committee. So I'm going to review as best I can what we do as far as local codes to address these complaints when they come in. So as far as tractor trailers, these are just some pictures of examples of different ones. And we deal with them in various districts depending on zoning and what is allowed. So if you're a business district, they may be allowed to have storage of some of the tractor trailers. Of course, most of the complaints are in residential areas, and the one on the right is a sample of that. So the development ordinance is under Chapter 4, and it's under accessory structures and uses, and then specific accessory use. S, and it's vehicles. The parking, storage, and use of vehicles are allowed as an accessory to any use allowed by this ordinance if it complies with the following standards. One talks about disabled vehicles, residentials, uses and other uses, and then improved parking area, which those don't apply. What we're talking about is the large vehicles. Under number 3, the parking of vehicles in excess of 24 feet in length or 14,000 pounds gross vehicle weight is prohibited in residential zoning districts with the following exceptions. And then it's, recreational RV, they're allowed, but they're allowed only like for temporary loading or unloading, or emergency or disaster, not just to have them there on the property. And the definition of gross vehicle weight is just the weight as maximum loaded weight for which a single vehicle is designed is specified by the manufacturer. So that's where we know what the GVW is. And then this is a nice little picture I found that said it. So it's the weight of the vehicle, and then the cargo, and then the passenger weight is what the gross vehicle weight is. So it's not necessarily just the weight of the truck itself sitting in someone's yard. And this is I pulled from DMV that just gives the classes of vehicles. And the one we're talking about typically is class 4 and above. This is 5, 6, 7, and 8. So we can kind of visually just guess if there's a complaint, we know if it's in violation or not. And usually we're talking about the tractor trailers. We do sometimes have bucket trucks and then other commercial vehicles. Sometimes a tow truck, not a fire truck so far, so we're good on that. But that's kind of how we know just by size, by eye, and what would be a violation. And this is how we can tell by looking at the vehicle if it's a violation or not. It's usually a sticker or a stamp that's inside the doors of them, and I believe it's also on their registration for vehicles. So if they don't have this on the door, if it's registered, we can ask for a copy of that so that we can verify and show them. And this is a sample on private property, how it's pretty cut and dry. If we go out there and it's parked at a residence, we cite that residence for the violation. Some of the ones we're getting more lately are where they're parked on city street and we don't know who they belong to. So we have tried to be creative, but not always ending up with the results we wanted. But we do put a sticker on we type it up and put it in a clear portfolio and tape it that says it's in violation. Please contact our number so we can try and identify who it is if possible. Sometimes the person complaining can tell us who it belongs to, and sometimes they don't. And then sometimes we'll try to guess who it may belong to. And surely if you send it to the wrong person, they're going to call and tell you who it belongs to. So sometimes we do end up by mistake with that happening, but we do try our best to get it right. And I say this and point out it's on city street because typically we do not do any enforcement for vehicles on the city street. It's only because it meets it's in the zoning ordinance, and it's the oversized vehicle. So that's why we do enforce it on the city street or private property. And so Chapter 9, our process is we identify who is in violation and we send the notice of violation with the correct violation cited. And then they have a compliance date, whether it's on private property or city street. We give them 14 days to bring it into compliance, which is to remove it. We had one gentleman who tried to apply for a home-based business to say he needed to store his tractor trailer there, and of course he was denied, but for creativity. And, but we give them 14 days to get it removed, and then we follow up to see if it's been corrected. If it has not been corrected, we will continue to go out until it is, issuing civil penalties and taking pictures for each, and it's a progressive civil penalty that goes 50, 100, 200 to 500, and it stays at 500 for each after that.
Is that assessed per day or?
It's per, and that's what I was getting ready to say, is it's per time we go out. It could be per day. Our general rule of thumb is every 2 weeks, unless it's something really, it's just gone on and we're not getting their attention, and we may move it up to once a week to try and get somebody to call us. If it's a traffic hazard, and if we go out and we see it's a traffic hazard and calls them, we of course just report it immediately to PD. We don't get involved with it, and let them handle that. And then the trick with this, also with the development ordinance, is once we cite the property owner for a violation, if it's the same owner, same violation for the next 2 years, they do not get a new notice of violation. They immediately go to civil penalties. So if we sent that one house a notice today and he moves his tractor trailer and in 2 months he puts it back there, we don't send him another notice. We send him a civil penalty, and we document it with a picture to show what was there when we did the.
Can you go back one slide for me? Okay, thank you.
You need to cut that one down. Amount of time and money you're spending, we need to move that to $100 fine and then a $500 fine. I mean, people aren't gonna respond. We're spending staff time, gas.
Can you bump up the initial penalty?
No, bump it from 1 to 5, so you would go on the second, from the second to the third, go to 5.
I'll be fine with taking the first one at 100 and the second one at 500.
Who sets those? Is that-
That's
Thanks for
just-
responding to-
That's what he suggested.
Thanks for responding to it.
And this is in the development ordinance. It's not under anything, so that, and this is for all of the development ordinance. If I'm not mistaken, the majority of development falls under the same category. So if you change it, it would be changing for everything, I guess, unless you made a special exemption for it to be specific.
Are you saying like for like illegally parked cars downtown, if they get like a 50 and?
Front yard parking is an example. We send them a notice for front yard parking. It's the same cumulative progressive penalties, $50, $100, $200, $500.
How's that enforced if this is, say, somebody that doesn't live in City of High Point, they don't pay High Point taxes?
We send it to whoever the owner of the property is or whoever the tenant is, once we can identify it. Now, if they're just bringing their truck in and parking it on the city street, that'd be unusual, I think. What we did have is down on South Main Street, and it is a different, I think it's General Business District. The gentleman started allowing people to park, and it was one of these pictures.
Off from the wall.
He was allowing, down at the bottom, he was allowing tractor trailers to park there and use that for storage. I guess they were paying him. So in checking into it, that wasn't allowed use there. They could use it for parking, but they could not use it for it was kind of weird. They had to have a tractor attached to it. It couldn't just be the trailer part of it. So they were allowed to do that. And those may be people who don't live in the city, maybe live down in Archdale or live just outside, or I'm not sure.
I noticed there's quite a few parked over there by Planet Fitness over there on Eastchester. Is that allowed because that's a parking lot for commercial use?
It may. I would have to check to see the zoning on that and all, but that definitely changes it when you get into those more commercialized areas. Joe?
Well, I can say from some of the conversations I've had with people that were on both ends of the spectrum, you got the owner-operators that have been complaining because we're trying to hurt their business or something like that, and, it's not, that's definitely not what it is. We have to keep up the streets, but.
Right.
I was down here at City Hall long before I ever got on council because I had 3 limos parked in my driveway 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and didn't know that was in violation. I was figured it was my driveway, they didn't go out in the street or whatever. But it was because my business had grown to a point that we needed to go and find a commercial place to park. And like some of these people who's been commenting, I was mad at the city and all this other stuff. Isn't this still America and everything, but it forced me to take the next step for my business, which a lot of these owner-operators, if they understood, there are those commercial lots available. They can pay, I think my dump trucks were $85 to $100 a truck per month. It's a nominal fee, and it gives you some separation to have your house for your house and your business somewhere else. Most of them are, ones we use were gated or had surveillance and security, so I'm hoping that the word will get out that these people will take that next step to do what's right for their business and also for their fellow neighbors, that it's causing a nuisance.
And that, we try to explain that the residential streets aren't made for those large vehicles that messes it up. And of course, you can see where they're pulling in and out of the driveway, you know, where
Sure.
it has done that. And we do get complaints, a lot of, it's that this is my only vehicle, I drive home, and so I'm here for the weekend, and I'm leaving it here, or my wife has the only car, and, you know, everybody, we try to explain it to them as best we can. And we have come across home-based businesses similar to yours that maybe grew a little bit. They had one limo, which would be allowed, they would probably be allowed to have one per the home-based business ordinance, but then if they got two, that starts to cross the line, and it's a good thing, and they're in growing pains, but it's just in violation of the ordinance, and we try to explain that to them.
One thing I didn't understand back then was that you could have one commercial vehicle, like I could have one limousine driveway, but I could do an oil change on my personal car, but I can't do an oil change on other ones. I thought there was some dumb stuff in there that didn't quite make sense. If it's allowed to be at your property, and is that something that the city of Five Point could change? Because there's just no logic behind, I can't do an oil change or maintenance on my one vehicle that is allowed at my residence, but versus a personal.
I don't understand that. So you're saying you were told you couldn't, like if it was your limo, you couldn't do the oil change on your limo that was
Could do
there?
any maintenance on the one vehicle that was allowed in my driveway.
I don't think we look at it that way. I don't think that's how it's currently enforced.
And it was
As
something
long
like
as,
I couldn't have more than one employee there at one time or something like that, or,
right, that's the home-based business. You can only have
Yeah.
one employee reporting, and you can't cause a traffic issue, you know, with people. Because that's how sometimes we find out about the home-based business, is they'll start having people come to their home,
right,
and then it's causing traffic, or they have employees start reporting, and then the traffic starts blocking the road.
yeah.
But if you had I think now, if you had anybody were to have a vehicle at their home that was for business, if they were changing the oil, doing something, we're not gonna go, oh, you can't do that. As long as they're disposing of it properly and they're not causing a traffic hazard
This
of
might
any
be
sort.
way outdated, like I said, this was probably 2011 or so, or 12, because I had to go buy a tanning salon just so I could park my vehicles at the tanning.
Is that the one you had on block with the hood up?
Yeah, right.
But we do, and this has definitely increased since the pandemic, as far as getting these complaints for tractor trailers, and we just
Now,
do the best we
do
can.
we have, one thing I'd asked when this was all coming up was, I know this isn't the city's responsibility, but maybe even through the Chamber of Commerce, something, have access to the for-hire or for-profit lots that we could somehow direct these owner-operators, say, hey, this guy over at Brentwood's got one, and, you know, so that maybe they just don't know, they know the area, you know, whatever, so they can call that person and conduct business with them to park their truck legally at that lot.
And we've made that suggestion, that's why we usually get this is my only vehicle, and if I come in at 1 a.m., my wife has to come pick me up, that's why I just drive it home, or something along those lines, is kind of just some of the excuses we hear. Do y'all have any other questions for me as far as code enforcement?
Back in the beginning, the word residential was underlined. How does it change in other areas? Chris referred to, you know, certain areas.
It depends on the zoning, and a lot of times that starts to get way over my head. Minimum housing is more my area. I've learned a lot about the development ordinance and zoning. When it comes to certain districts, there are different overlays and different things that are allowed or not allowed. So I usually go over to planning and say, here's the district we're at, and here's a picture of it. Is this allowed or is it not? And I'll usually let Chris Andrews research it and give me the definitive answer as to if it would be allowed or not.
Councilman Chris Williams. Question, kind of a two-parter. So I can remember that you're talking that they get a year's, basically if they offend and you apply a fee, that pretty much stays in place for a year?
Two years.
Okay, so 2 years. So if they go, you know, they go away for a couple weeks and come back, they're already in the system and they keep the escalation in fees.
Yes.
So,
And ideally, if in a perfect world, we've already issued them, let's say, 2 or 3 civil penalties, so they're up, so they've had a 50, 100, or 200, and we're sending them another violation 6 months later, it should pick up at the 500 if it's caught and done properly.
all right.
What's your recovery rate on those citations?
Not very high. We
Question
do have some
offline.
people, but it's not very high. We just remind them we're always looking for compliance, because their first thing is, you just want our money, and it's like, no, we just want compliance.
So, don't want to speculate. What's the comparisons to Greensboro? Now, I haven't read it. I don't know it. But
The
I've heard
ordinance-
they actually can tow vehicles after a certain, a number of offenses. Is that,
It depends on which ordinance you're referring to,
I was talking about city of Greensboro.
but it still depends on which, I
Oh,
know,
I see what you're talking
if you're talking about tractor trailer and the oversized vehicle ordinance, or if you're talking like junk vehicles.
No, I was talking about tractor trailers.
Oh, okay. I don't think Greensboro can tow them from private property. They could under city street, PD would have to answer that.
Right.
But I don't, or Matt may be able to answer.
Well, there's a microphone, right?
Okay. Matt Carpenter, Transportation Department. I know that at one time, our ordinance was very similar to Greensboro, and I'm not sure if theirs has changed as far as both the truck parking on the street and in residential areas. So we had the same zoning ordinance for many years, and they could do pretty much the same thing that Lori was doing, so I'm not sure if theirs has changed. I'm pretty sure that they have the same on-street truck parking prohibitions that we have. Us, Greensboro, Winston, Asheville, Burlington, I want to say Charlotte, are some of the ones that I researched in 2015 that had very similar ordinances to us as far as prohibiting truck parking on-street and in residential areas.
Okay. My only concern in that part of it is just trucks that are parking on the streets, and especially the ones with attached trailers. We get it like a few repeat offenders that they're there, they're gone, they come back and they do it again. And kids I've seen like kind of just playing, hop out right in front, almost right in front of the vehicle. So if in my mind, the threat of towing would be a nice deterrent, because
And
you can feel them, but
ED can do that, but we would rely on police department for that. Early in my career, I did a lot of the same thing that Lori's doing now, and I'm actually happy to see that you've sort of taken that over. I didn't really know that had taken, no, it's fine. But when I started with the city, that's what, we would get that complaint, as a transportation department, and part of my job was to go out and make contact with these drivers and say, okay, you can't be here, you gotta get gone. 9 times out of 10, that worked.
okay.
There was the occasional one that I would have to escalate and go to someone with PD to help me out, but that's usually as far as it went. And I don't know that I've ever seen anybody tow a truck as far as that goes, so,
All right,
yeah.
thank you.
Do you have any other questions for me?
No, thank you, Lord.
Okay, thank you.
Now, I guess we can hear from the police perspective.
Sure.
Well, I'm Kyle Teschke with the police department. I actually am the hit and run investigator for the department and work out of our traffic unit. When I was tasked with putting this together, I kind of looked at it, one, from the basic officer's point of view, as well as the citizens. I found that there's a lot of confusion in the city ordinances. Some are contradictory of other ones, but a lot of this information I pulled straight off the city website, just to be able to kind of show what most people are going to be able to see. First thing I did was I looked at our call volume for the last year, just to even get an idea of how much of this is getting reported to us. Over the last year, there's about over 1,100 calls for service that had something to do with illegally parked vehicles. That could be market complaints, that could be someone in front of a fire hydrant, any vehicle whatsoever. Of those, 53 were related to tractor trailers. Out of all those, 3 of those 53 were for tractor trailers parked on the 74 on-ramps, either at Johnson or Greensboro Road. 16 were in areas that I would call mixed zoning, so they're either residential and commercial. One of those big ones is the Eastgate Shopping Center in Five Points. Dallas Avenue's behind it. The south part of Dallas Avenue is all commercial. The north side of the road is all residential. So a lot of times when people go out, there's confusion as to whether or not is that a residential zone? Is that commercial? Are they allowed to park there? And then 34 of those 53 calls were actually residential areas that are the entire block, both sides are residential areas. I actually called Matt Carpenter from Transportation, just kind of asked some questions, because I know a lot of this is his wheelhouse, or he has a lot of knowledge on the ordinances. Because my impression in the nearly 20 years, or at least 18 years that I've been here with this agency, is that commercial vehicles could not park in residential zones. What I found out when I started looking into this is commercial vehicles aren't allowed to park on city streets anywhere in the city. So it's not just in neighborhoods. Obviously, they can't, I'm not talking about Eastchester, Wendover, Main Street, thoroughfares like that, but thinking more of like Lincoln, Prospect, some of those industrial areas off of Market Center and West Green Drive, where they may be 4 or 5 lane width roads that are actually only 2-lane roads, but you have a lot of companies that stage their tractor trailers out in the road, or park nearby, but it's all industrial. It's pretty much only tractor trailer traffic in those areas, and we don't get complaints from those areas, but it's also one of the issues that if you start enforcing the tractor trailers parking in certain areas, you may have some of those drivers start now calling about the commercial zones where they're not allowed to park either. Not talking about parking lots or anything, but that's just one thing to consider as well. So for me, thought there was a difference between residential and commercial, but they can't actually park anywhere. Some of the things that will still fall under the commercial vehicle category is going to be anything that's going to be a truck or the trailer, either separated or attached. If it's just a trailer, that's easy because there's the ordinance that you can't have any detached trailers parked in a city street. So that's, most of these we're talking about is going to be the tractor trailer combos, but this also falls in the category of RVs, and some of these people that use full-size pickup trucks and have those enclosed trailers for their landscaping business, those are going to fall into the commercial vehicle category, which means somebody who wants to park their F-250 and their enclosed trailer in front of their house, they're not going to be able to do that. That's going to be something that would have to be enforced as well. So it's not just going to be tractor trailers that would fall into the category.
Kyle, let me stop you right there. Actually, no. The F-250, actually F-450 and below would be legal under our current ordinance. They would fall in the 1-ton exception. They would do anything 1 ton and below is legal. It's the 1 ton and above. It's anything above a ton rated that would be illegal.
So commercial under 1 ton can still
1
park.
ton and under. So anything that's rated, and the way they rate vehicles is a little odd now. Even a 1 ton pickup can haul 10,000 pounds at this point, but it's anything 1 ton and under is exempted. They are allowed to park there.
Including the attached trailer.
Yes,
Even if it's both
Over
trailer
1
and the
ton.
truck are used for commercial purposes.
yes.
So that's going to be also part of the confusion as well, is because there's that gray area, but the way that it's written, if you're looking at DMV, that's going to fall in as a commercial vehicle.
Yes.
But when you have a city ordinance, you have some saying no commercial vehicles can park on city streets, period. And then you have another one that's titled residential, truck and residential parking, which is the part that I was talking about earlier. Some of it's contradictory, where it's difficult to understand. If someone goes out and need to enforce it, the vehicle may actually fall into the category, but when you've got a gray area with the commercial vehicles, where on one road it's a commercial vehicle, on another it's not, and some of the ordinances conflict with each other, it's going to make enforcement harder when we get involved, just because most people aren't going to be able to differentiate. Even just today in an earlier talk with Matt, I realized there's about 4 or 5 different ordinances that all kind of refer to the truck parking. Yes, sir.
Chris Williams again. Do you have the numbers on like, the exempt? I mean, like calls for exempt vehicles, like? I know you may not have it in front of you, I was just curious if that could be.
When our police department researches all the calls, they literally put in every variation of commercial vehicle, truck, tractor, TT, all the different abbreviations, and I pulled up every single call that even mentioned a tractor trailer or a commercial vehicle, period, whether or not it was a substantiated violation or it wasn't, and even, I had to weed through it, even came up with tractor trailers involved and traffic crashes. So whether it was a valid complaint or the vehicle was legally parked, that's just a number that even involved trucks, period, just to kind of show how what number we're actually looking at.
Thank you.
Matt, you may know the answer. So, just so I understand, why is that distinction? Because up to 1 ton, is it just because it less wear and tear on the city street?
That's the way section 158 was written. That's the last sentence. It basically says that I think the point of that was to help out the commercial landscape guy who has a large size pickup where he's pulling a trailer with lawnmowers on it. I think that was pointed to help him out.
Sure.
Because those vehicles operate in our neighborhoods quite frequently. So it was, as I understand the ordinances, they're mainly slanted toward tractor trailers. That's who they're pointed at. And for me, that's the easiest way to think of it. If you have an officer responding, if anyone's responding to it, and it's not a tractor trailer, let it go. Yeah.
And for the most part, enforcement and complaints are gonna be, it may be short-term parking, but it's gonna be something that's generally overnight or for days at a time that people are calling. It's not gonna be the person who just moved from out of state and there's a tractor trailer parked in the neighborhood unloading all the furniture. Those are listed as exceptions, but that's,
Yes.
even if they weren't, that's gonna be something where the average officer that goes out, there's gonna be tolerance to let that continue. So this is more of, they come home on Friday after dinner time, park in the neighborhood, and then 3, 4 a.m. on Monday, and go back out for their weekly long run. And so it's just a 2 or 3 day over the weekend complaint is primarily the ones that we're gonna get, or at least the ones that I've seen.
We've seen, I mean, I've had just during the last couple of weeks, I know back there on Timber Lane, that we've had some complaints come in just for box trucks too. In addition to tractor trailers, just big old box trucks that one was parked in a driveway and one was parked on one of the roads I walk every day. I can't think of it right now, but so I know those, you get calls for those types of complaints as well? Box trucks, moving trucks, things that are,
Something like a 24-footer or
yeah,
a little bit larger.
moving van type thing.
The complaints that we get are, like Matt was saying, there's mostly the tractor trailers.
Yeah.
But we far get more complaints about people calling in because the person parked their Toyota Camry across the street in front of their house and the license plate's expired. We get easily more of those calls than we do for tractor trailers.
What would be the call on that? So you got a 20, 30-foot box truck type thing
Well-
that's used for commercial use, it's parked on a city street.
Okay, so, if it's parked in the driveway, then that's gonna fall under lorry. And if it's greater than 14,000 gross vehicle weight, which is gonna check the tag or the
Right.
whatever, then that would, most of those fall above that, so. A tornado warning? Yeah, we do.
Tornado warning.
Okay. You want me to continue?
Chief's here, we'll be all right.
I turned my phone off.
Let me, let me look here just a second. Maybe pick up my train of thought. So 158 refers to motor truck carriers operating as either common or contract carriers over regular or irregular routes. All other operators of motor trucks or trailers of any kind, including non-motorized trailers and standalone containerized units, that would be your box truck or what have you. So all this is sort of a judgment call. So if it's a U-Haul pickup in somebody's driveway and they're moving, no one's gonna say anything about that. If it's a food truck and it's their business, then again, that goes back to Lori, and then maybe it's a home-based business, and maybe that's allowed. So, I don't know. And then if they parked it on the street, I think that could possibly be an enforcement issue where either me or Teskey would be making a phone call trying to figure out, can you get it out of the road? So, there's that.
So would the food truck be in violation?
Sir?
Would the food truck, if it's under 14,000 pounds, would it be in violation if it's on city street?
I don't know that those are under 14,000 pounds, is the thing, because I think from that slide that Lori showed, most of those box trucks fall above that. They fall in the class 4, class 5 range, and that's gonna put them over that gross vehicle weight. So they would not be allowed. They would not be allowed to park on the street. They could, in certain instances, be allowed to park on the lot if it was part of a home-based business. So, like I say, all of this it's a gray area, it's a little fuzzy. There's nothing, like I say, for us, it's been tractor trailers. We can get rid of the tractor trailers. Everybody else, we don't try to say a whole lot.
I'll just get with you personally about that one, because I'm just still confused on how to help that one neighbor, but
What's that?
the one that has the box truck that's parked right there.
Yeah, so so you're saying you have a neighbor that has a box truck, is that?
There's a neighbor complaining about another neighbor that has one truck in the driveway and then one truck on the city street.
If that truck is rated greater than 14,000 gross vehicle weight, then yes, he would have to find somewhere else to put that truck. If we got that complaint, I would be trying to make a call to that owner. And then eventually, if I couldn't, I'd be contacting Teskey to help me out with getting him towed.
But if it's under that 14,000, there's not much we can do.
Right.
Okay.
Where are we on the construction piece? Lori said, this is kind of an evolution progress thing, but stated that the residential streets aren't really made for the tractor trailer type stuff, at least to stay there for much. But you talked about F-450s and, you know, we've come a long way. It was built Ford tough in the last 25 years. From a weight perspective, when you have that vehicle and a loaded big commercial, are we eclipsing that weight to get in that category where the roads weren't really made for that either?
I don't think so.
Okay.
And mainly, the roads are not, residential streets are not built for the continued
Correct.
use of that loaded vehicle.
Correct.
The one-off, when someone's moving into the home and it's there for a week or two, or a couple days, that's okay.
Right.
But they will find the weak spots in our roadway if there are weak spots.
Sure.
So, no, I think if it's a commercial, if the vehicle's available for the general public to purchase, the F-350, whatever, I think our residential street standards can handle that kind of traffic.
But the city ordinances do allow us to ticket and tow. The city ordinance says 48 hours. Our green stickers that we actually put on the vehicles have a 48-hour block and a 72-hour block. Generally, we give that extra day for the grace period. For the most part, there aren't repeat offenders. So this also isn't necessarily something where we're getting a complaint on the same vehicle every other weekend, that sort of thing. State statute actually allows us to tow parked vehicles from highways after 24 hours. However, the other thing that is a gray area that's been discussed with DOT, North Carolina DOT, is whether or not the on and off ramps are considered surface streets or actually part of the highway system. And regardless of what it may be, there's also no consistency in signage for those ramps. Some of them have no parking listed, some of them do. So that's also an issue of if you have,
Per general statute, they're not allowed to park there, though. I mean, no signs are required for that.
Correct, but from North Carolina DOT, they specifically weren't sure if the ramps were considered part of the highway system. And that's why they haven't, that's why they've reached out for SHP
Okay.
to monitor our ramps, to try and do the enforcement, just because we weren't sure if we could actually tow, if that would fall into it's in the city limits part that we could tow under, or is this on the highway and technically not in the city limits? So that's why we've kind of avoided towing from any of the ramps.
But if it was 48 hours after, you could tow it either way, is that not the case?
In the city,
Only
we
in the
can.
city, okay.
Yeah, so that's the gray area, is just trying to figure out which, even though the highway goes through the city, can we consider that part of the city limits that we're then towing it under the ordinance?
But it can be towed either way, whether it's city or highway, it's just a matter of when. That's my question. Because I saw 24 on highway, and then a 48.
That's the 24 on the highway, but again, they're still trying to factor out whether or not the ramps would be considered part of the highway that would fall under that 24-hour rule.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I got you.
Yeah. But yeah, so ideally, yes, we could tow most of these vehicles after 48 hours, which I'll get into that here in a little bit. Basically, what I was looking at is the reason we're gonna do the enforcement is either a safety issue or it's just more of an eyesore issue that people don't want to see them. I just put in some of the dimensions just to kind of give an idea of how much space it's gonna take up. Some of the streets where we have gotten complaints are 3 or 4 lanes wide, but they're still only 2-lane roadways. So there's still ample space where it's not a safety issue, and I'm thinking of more of streets, I was discussing with Matt earlier, like Swarthmore. That's all commercial warehouses, and that's probably a 35 to 45 foot wide road. There's only 4 or 5 businesses down there. It's all gonna be truck traffic coming in and out. This isn't a neighborhood area, but technically they can't be parked out in the road, but it's still not necessarily it's not a safety issue because the visibility issues aren't necessarily there all the time. But just to kind of give a general idea of what we're looking at, you have one tractor trailer parked somewhere. If you were to line up some Suburbans, and the average spacing people usually leave between cars 4 or 5 feet, you're looking at, that's basically the same as taking up a size of 4 Suburbans. But the main difference is the width. It's almost 2 feet wider and almost twice the height. So that's the safety concern is gonna be the visibility of someone being able to see around a tractor trailer. And the thinner the road is, most of your streets are about 24 foot wide, but you may get some narrow streets that use 10 lanes, like it was before they widened the bridge on East Chester over 74. When they added in that extra turn lane to alleviate traffic, they cut it down from 5 12-foot lanes to 6 10-foot lanes. But obviously, the narrower the street is, the more that visibility is gonna be affected, where if someone has to get around the tractor trailer, you're talking about close to 100 feet. They may have to drive on the wrong side of the road just to get around it. So if you've got curbs or anything like that, that's gonna make it more of a safety issue. For the eyesore, it's a lot of this is my kind of rule of thumb, but it seems to be common when I've talked to other officers. If we're going to go to an area just because someone doesn't like the fact that a tractor trailer is parked there, anytime someone calls in a traffic complaint, I never narrow it down or pick out one individual vehicle. If they complain and say that car's registration's expired, I want them ticketed, I always tell them the other 3 that are parked behind it, that are parked left to curb, or also illegally parked, they're gonna get tickets too. We're not gonna come out where there's 8 or 10 violations in a block, but only pick one particular person and give a ticket to. So that's part of it as well, is it's not gonna just, if we're gonna increase the park enforcement in the neighborhoods for tractor trailers, we also need to be fair and do it with the other vehicles as well. North side of the city, you can pretty much pick any neighborhood you want, and you'll probably find 20 to 30 cars illegally parked in front of someone's house, because everyone likes to get out their driver's side door and walk across their front yard, but those are all legally parked. The other thing too is a lot of these people that we may be dealing with in the neighborhoods are gonna be residents. So someone's trying to park their truck for their tractor trailer in their own driveway in front of the residence. It is a tax-paying resident that has been doing this for a long time, that we may have to kind of handle that a little bit differently rather as opposed to just doing strict enforcement. My recommendation was that if we're going to do this is to do some type of communication either through social media or sending out notices in the city utility bills, just to let them know that tractor trailer enforcement, it's against city ordinance and there's no parking in residential areas wherever we want to specify, as opposed to just cracking down, because there are areas where trucks have been parking for years, if not decades, that have been in violation. If we just start enforcing it right away, you're going to have some of the kickback on that, which for the most part, that's going to be coming back on us because we're going to be the ones enforcing it. This is the pictures, the green sticker, that's what we put on a car if there is a violation where it can be towed. If it's not a traffic hazard, we will sticker it. If it's a traffic hazard, we'll tow those right away. But if it's just a parking violation where they needs to be moved, we'll put the warning sticker on there, and it has the 48 or 72-hour block. After that, we delay a call for service, have an officer come back after the 72 hours and see if the vehicle's still there. If it is, it'll get towed. If not, they'll add notes to the call, so there's still a history once it's stickered. And then these are all the basic violations that now show up on our parking ticket. Every violation that's up there would be a $50 fine. The other is generally going to fall into some of the city ordinances, like the noise violations or something like that, that we may have to hand right in there. But number 11 is generally what we've got listed: parking a vehicle on public street in excess of 1 ton capacity.
What's the logic behind the left to curb? Like, why does that create a safety concern?
The easiest way to explain it to people is in order to get to that parking space and in order to leave that parking space, you have to drive the wrong way on the wrong side of the street. So neighborhoods, it doesn't, a lot of people don't think of that just because you don't have the lines. But if you were to if there was a double yellow line down the middle of a neighborhood street, your entire vehicle has to go the other side of the double yellow line in order to get to your parking space.
Makes sense. I just never know how to answer that question.
Yeah. But like I said, you get so many people that park that way in neighborhoods that I would never do anything but write parking tickets in neighborhoods if we start doing left to curb. So most of the time if we do it, it's responding to complaints, but it's more of safety issues like fire hydrants, blocking driveways, blocking stop signs too close to the intersection, stuff like that.
But that's more for like something that's long-term. I mean, somebody, like I know I have to park left to curb to load up my camper because it's the way the door opens up when we're going on trips. So I gotta park it there for like 2 hours. But that's not gonna be something that's somebody's typically gonna call in and complain to you guys about for something for a couple hours, or is it usually?
We get several complaints from one resident in particular about cars that parked for about 10 minutes to pick up their kids after school. That it puts signs through an entire neighborhood that you can't park between certain hours to pick up their kids.
That was over there near Southwest.
Yeah, it is exactly where it is.
Yeah.
So we will get complaints for things that are short-term, where most of the time, by the time an officer gets there, the problem's already alleviated itself. But as you're saying, if it's short-term, someone's loading or unloading, that's written into city ordinance. But even if it wasn't, it's still common sense that most people are gonna give them benefit of the doubt and say, well, you're not supposed to park here, finish up unloading, and then park it correctly.
Right.
So,
Whatever happened with the one over there, Southwest, I mean, it's just, they're gonna keep calling and complaining, we're gonna keep going, and people are still gonna be going when we get there.
go ahead.
I've been intimately involved with that one for many years.
Yeah.
We've posted no parking signs. We've posted no parking signs with a time limit. Part of the issue with that is that parents didn't want to wait in the car rider line, and so they told the school, oh, my kid's walking home, and then they were allowed to walk across to the neighborhood, and that's where they would pick their kid up, and then they would drive out of the neighborhood. As far as I know, it's still taking place. We have signs in place. For the most part, I have not heard complaints from the neighbors who are most affected there. I think the signs have pushed it out away from their driveways a little bit. The worst case I heard was, a guy didn't receive mail. He doesn't receive mail during the school year because they were blocking his mailbox, and that's whenever the post office decided to show up and deliver mail. And there'd be enough cars parked there that him and his neighbors couldn't get their mail. So that's why we worked with them on getting those signs installed and trying to create that no parking zone to help push that away from that intersection. As far as I know, those kids still walk over there in that neighborhood. And my fear is that one of these days, mom or dad's not gonna be there because they got held up somewhere else, and then what does that kid do? And these are elementary school kids, so that's been my issue with it for the time that I've dealt with it. I don't know what y'all have been able to do as far as enforcement, Kyle. I'm not sure if there has been any enforcement on any of that. I don't know if you've been able to get there in time.
Before the schools all closed with all the COVID restrictions, we had gone up around in September for that, both sides of the elementary school. There was stuff off of Single Leaf as well. Went out there, I created letters basically explaining the issues with the safety and the parking restrictions, passed them out to everyone who's picking up their child and reminding them that there's a car rider line and that's where the appropriate place is to pick them up. After that, we didn't have any issues for the entire school year. So it's more of the new parents of the parents of the new students that go to school. Once the message is kind of spread out in September, this is not the place to pick up, go to school, kind of alleviates itself. We still get repeat complaints from one resident in particular, but every time we've gone out, we've never seen more than 3 or 4 cars, and they all park outside where the signage is. And the signage basically covers about 4 houses in both directions of that crosswalk.
Yeah.
And it's short term. They show up about 5 minutes before the kids get out, and they're out of there within a 10-minute time window. And they legally park. They literally drive past the no parking signs and then park. So the signs have helped, but it may have just been that one little phase, because we have had times where 4, 5, 6 driveways in all 3 directions from the T intersection, there was cars parked on both sides of the road. So once we showed up, it kind of alleviated itself, and we didn't really have to do any tickets, except for a couple. But we still monitor it just because the size of that school and those long car rider lines. It's every year it bleeds into the neighborhoods right around there. So, but again, most of it's just the commercial vehicle. I think is going to be the biggest thing that we would handle. The tractor trailers. But they seem to be isolated to a couple different areas. Some of the challenges that I put in is the fact that a lot of these are weekend parkers, where they drive long hauls during the week, park on the weekends. But it's limited to a couple neighborhoods, so it's not as widespread. If they are calling and complaining, it may be going to code enforcement or to transportation, and not us. Part of the issue is in order to have the vehicles towed, they have to remove the drive shaft, even out of a box truck, a U-Haul. So for the commercial tow companies, I called them. In order for them to tow it, if it's just the cab or the trailer, it's $650 tow. If they're together, they would charge the person $1,300. But again, based on the city contract they have for towing vehicles, that is also a gray area, and they may actually be limited to only be able to charge $220, which they said is barely enough to even cover basically their fuel and work going out there. So they basically break even on commercial tows. But
Who do we use?
Bucks,
Okay.
Wrecker Service out of Thomasville, and Garrett's are the 2 right now that have tow trucks that are capable of towing commercial vehicles. Arskis used to be one,
Yeah.
but the owner passed, so their business has been suspended. So they're not even in operation, so we're down to just those 2 companies.
We don't allow them to charge more than $220.
Based on the way the city contract is, the tow company says they're not allowed to charge $220, and I'm pretty sure they've gone through it with a fine-tooth comb, because they're gonna wanna charge as much as they can. But our police legal advisor said that he thinks they could, the way that it's written, that they could be able to charge their normal rate. So that's, again, it's just a gray area of what they're allowed to do, so that's just one aspect of the tow. So that's, even though they're on contract, if they have to tow them, they are only able to charge a basic fee to cover their costs. That may not be something they're gonna respond to. But market, probably about 10 years ago, I towed a box truck, and that's the last time I think I've towed a commercial vehicle that wasn't involved in a crash. So this is also isn't necessarily something that we may even have to do. If we do the enforcement, just the threat of the tow, it's not gonna be something that we're gonna be towing every week. Already discussed all the other things there, just some of the issues with the residential versus commercial zones and the towing issues. But it still would be best if we had some type of information campaign just to kind of publicize what we do, like when the new tethering ordinance came out, I think it was close to a year of sending out information in all the utility bills about the tethering coming up, and then once that started, it was 6 months of warnings only, which I don't think we need to have it that long, but I think at least 6 months, or even just said starting January 1st, 2023, just to kind of give these businesses time. I know there is that one parking place off of Brentwood, Gotcha Towing, that has their tow there. They also have the long-term commercial parking lot, but that's also something that was suggested earlier that maybe, I think that'll be a great idea for be able to relay and say, go to the city website, or here's a list of places you can park, obviously for a fee, but that's gonna be the main thing, is if I can't park it here, where can I go park my truck? So as long as they have that option, I think that may alleviate a lot of the issues once it's addressed.
Y'all may know this, and Dick, in your business, you may know, but the AAA self-storages of the world, so they, I mean, I know you can park campers and boats and all kinds of stuff in certain ones. But are they set up for any of this, for a tractor trailer or anything?
Who was I talking to about this? I think Eric Dickerson was working on something with Herb Shannon about a project he's working on. And I think there was something about any new storage construction that RVs had to be parked inside and not outside. I don't know, but I know over there on Greensboro Road, right across the street from my lot, they have some storage units, High Point Self Storage, and a couple other ones that they got. I've never seen tractor trailers there, but I've seen a ton of campers and things like that. Lori, are those allowed to park in a storage unit parking?
I've never had that come up. I've never seen one there. Like you, I've seen the RVs, but I've never seen a tractor trailer there.
Okay.
I want to say they would probably be allowed to be
Yeah,
there.
I just wondered if they even offered the option, and I know based on the numbers that, you know, we're, out of all the calls you get, a lot of them are, I mean, it may be about tractor trailers, but on a percentage basis, that's not the largest part of what you get. But on that occasion that you do, if that's even an option for them, I didn't know.
The challenge, I would think, I know for most campers, they're set up to drive on gravel, dirt, whatever, and so I've got a storage unit over there that I have just for personal stuff, but their RVs and stuff are parked in the grass area that they can do. If you don't have significant turnaround spot, space, you're not gonna be able to back a trailer in there.
Sure.
The tractor's not a problem, but the trailer would be the bigger challenge.
That's what I was gonna say, was the space, and then maybe the weight, their parking may not be able to support tractor trailers to be
Okay,
on there.
I just wondered if anybody knew. I don't frequent the places, so I didn't know.
No, I have put stuff in a storage unit here in the city, and I know they've got somewhere they leave trailers, or some people park their food trucks, but they just don't have a lot of space for the oversized vehicles, so even if they do offer the option, you're only talking a handful that would even be able to park there, and that's assuming that storage unit has
Understand.
nobody else parking there, so.
Right.
What's the status of that parking lot? It was like a parking lot or whatever, right about North Main, where the Sheets is. What's the status on that situation with that lot?
That was actually private property. They had a lease set up with Park, and that lease ended, I believe, and I believe that entire parcel north of Old Plank Road right there is being proposed for development.
Yeah, it's for sale.
It is for sale right now.
That's what I
Yeah,
heard a
there
few months
was,
ago. I didn't know if it,
I believe planning had a meeting today to talk about the development proposal, and I think some of our staff and transportation was involved in that, so, yeah.
Okay.
Well, while we're in that area, you took me there, Vic, and it's coincidental in timing because of the text I got. Old Plank Road, have you got any calls or, and they're there, because I go that way a lot, going to see my mother. Right there at the 311-74 interchange where the new Starbucks is going up. There's 3 to 4 to 6 tractor trailers parking along Plank Road there. And it is I mean, if you've got the green light and you're leaving Sheets going to get on 74,
Right.
it's a visual impediment if, you know, you're going to enter that at 40, 45 miles an hour, because you cannot see what's coming if somebody's not stopped. So when you send somebody out that way, if you'll take a look, they're parked right along, they're right there right now, I just came through there. Right there at Starbucks, the new Starbucks is going up. And it is a visual hazard. And for the public record, I love truckers. Thank them for everything they do and all the stuff they deliver. But I don't know why they picked that spot there. But
I think most of them, I believe, are just using the on-ramps just because they're probably long-haul drivers and it's easier just to
well,
park
this is
there and
not
get
the
picked up.
on-ramp part. This is the part over
No.
near the McDonald's and the Starbucks.
No, I understand
Okay.
that.
Yeah. So, and I know they got regulations after so many hours they got to stop, or they get trapped
Yeah,
and
but if-
fined and all that
if-
stuff.
Most of that, if they're a long hauler, they're gonna be doing that at rest stops.
I
That
understand.
most ones around here are probably they leave for the week and come back for the weekend and park it.
Well, take a glance at it when you can.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
had a couple of texts early in the week about it.
Yeah, we can look at that. Yeah, as long as there's some option for them to park, I think that would address a lot of the issues. I think for the ones that are parking there, either on Old Plank or on the on-ramps, or at least, I think, taking the effort to keep them out of the neighborhoods that they live in. Because most people, that's what I've always heard is, you just can't park in residential areas, so they're finding other ways to park. So
Well-
if there are lots available, that will help too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But
so what,
take a look, maybe get
No, I will,
back to me
yeah.
on it, and then see if they're local drivers or if they're just stopping for a night or two or whatever.
Yeah, the biggest trick with the trucks is, they're gonna be registered to a carrier or a company, and a lot of them, even if they're a local tractor, some of them are leased. A lot of the trailers aren't necessarily affiliated with the same company.
Are you, for safety issues for you and the officers and stuff like that, if you were to go there and you do happen to see a driver getting in or see one sitting in a truck or whatever, can you go up and speak to them, or you?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, we can talk to anybody.
okay.
They don't always have to respond, but
Well,
that's
I
not
got
an issue, no. And that's been our biggest thing, because I didn't put it in here, but there was 7 special assignments that second shift did, where they went and just checked all the ramps after hours, just to try and catch the people parking, so you could actually tell them you can't park here, because it's hard to make contact with who's the person who's actually driving the company truck, so. But no, that's not an issue for us at all.
Okay.
That's basically been our main focus, is trying to actually time it so we can find out who is parking, so.
how hard would it be, or is there any conflict with us gathering that list of parking lots as a resource?
We can try. I certainly, I think we could try. I know we typically don't like to recommend
Yeah.
things to folks, but we could try to create a list and see what we can,
Or could we maybe voice that to the, maybe Business High Point,
yeah. I
to
think
where
that
they
we
could
can
be more of a
definitely do that.
resource like
Yeah.
that? Or visit High Point as well, because, you know, a lot of these people may check in, I think both of those, or if we could get one list, but have it as an available resource through Visit High Point and the chamber, then at least we could say, from the city standpoint, we don't have that, we can't recommend, but if you go to Visit High Point's website or whatever, wherever we can get somebody to host that, They have a listing of all the places that you could potentially reach out to. And maybe they'll join the chamber and make the chamber happy.
Recommending.
Yeah, we can certainly.
You ain't telling them which one. Just give them the list.
And then I went ahead and just put Google satellite photos of the 3 areas that pretty much had the overwhelming majority of those 33, 34 calls that I mentioned earlier. The behind Eastgate on Dallas, that seems to have alleviated itself, but historically that has been one of the big complaint areas, at least when I was on patrol. In that area, I worked that area specifically for about 5 or 6 years, and that was something that was off and on an issue over there. Proctor and Mill, that corner, specifically where it says 1017, that parking lot, the complaint for that area is those businesses are actually having the tractor trailers in the parking lot waiting to be able to get into the business for deliveries to either load or unload, and the refrigerator trucks are idling. Majority of those complaints from the residential areas around those businesses are because the trucks are idling. Not that it's a parking issue, blocking the road, but just that they're basically running while they're waiting to get into the business. So that's just an area where you've got mixed zoning. I don't know what it's zoned, that area, but you do have at least houses and businesses, so that's gonna complicate it as well if that's something where we wanna focus on residential areas for the actual enforcement of tractor trailers. Would this fall into one of those categories? And then Belmead Street, it's behind the Burger King, that's at Fairfield and South Main. The street that runs behind it is Belmead. It leads to a church and several apartment complexes, but the first couple 100 yards is probably a 3 pushing 4 lane width road with nothing there except for trees. But there were several complaints for tractor trailers parking on that section of Belmead. So that's just some of the examples. It's not just your typical residential neighborhood that everyone would kind of think of, either townhouse development or single-family homes. A lot of these are going to be mixed areas where it's businesses and residences. Seems to be the majority of our calls. That's all I had presented or set up. If y'all have any questions.
We didn't let you finish what we asked.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Chief, how long is your presentation? I know I've got a neighborhood meeting I want to try to get to by 5:30.
I can, it was mainly put together for the manager, and then we were just gonna present it, so we can do it another time.
Okay. If that's okay with the rest of the committee, I want to try to get to this neighborhood meeting that's regarding the Ski Club Johnson thing, and then maybe have you back next month to do that
And then
presentation.
put me on the agenda, don't put me on the agenda for PD anymore.
All right, well, then we need to take any vote to just postpone that from the agenda to another one, since it is on the agenda?
No, you don't need to.
Okay, all right. Any other questions from, all right. Hearing none, we are adjourned.